What's up guys? Yay! Another SYN20 IR video in your YouTube feed. But stick with me though, because I have some thoughts on this thing, and after the 2 or 3 weeks that I've spent with this now, my review notes and my thoughts on the amp have taken some pretty dramatic turns. So first of all, a big thanks to the guys at Zzounds for sliding this unit out to me ahead of release so that I could really put it through its paces here in the studio and then take it on stage with our 90s and 2000s rock cover band to see how it performs in a real world gigging musician's environment, and then bring it back here to the studio to show you guys. A second big thanks is to the man himself, Dave Friedman, for taking some time from his busy schedule to answer some of the questions that I had about how this BE Dlx unit operates, and sort of what was his design philosophy behind this, and also kind of to pick his brain a little bit about how this IR20 works. Finally, a big shout out to Miko and Kai at ML Soundlabs for providing some of the new Reflex IRs for me to try out with this amp. These are a completely different type of impulse response, and I'll have a link down in the description to their website, so if you're not familiar with them, you can go and learn all about what makes these new Reflex IRs unique and go grab some for yourself. And like always, each part of this video will have a timestamp associated with it down below so that you can quickly jump to whatever section of the video that you want to see, but There's a lot of good info to discuss with this amp and modules, so I recommend sort of kicking back and just sticking with me through this so that you'll hopefully have all of the information that you need to make a buying decision. Okay, let's get into this little beast. This is the latest entry into Synergy's modular preamps ecosystem. It's a 20-watt all-tube head with a pair of EL84s. It's got a built-in clean channel, a slot for one of their Synergy preamp modules, a built-in load box so that you can operate this safely without a speaker cabinet attached, and it has an IR loader. This way you can use it for silent recording and DI sound on the stage. If I had to guess, it's probably based on the same tech that they put into the new Soldano X88R preamp reissue. Now the IR loader and the DI output is always on, so you can run this in a hybrid output configuration using just a normal speaker cabinet as well as the DI SIM signal output. If you connect the amp to your computer using the USB cable that comes with the amp, you can also use the Synergy software to either select other built-in factory IRs, or you can load in your own impulse responses if you've got a favorite that you really like to use. Also, you can either hold down this button here for the IR selection or click the little toggle in the software to bypass the IR completely and just use the raw DI output into your own speaker simulation box or impulse loader or an effects processor with IR loading or anything like that. Furthermore, I noticed when using the DI out on this amp with the IR loader bypassed going into the aux stomp for cab simulation, compared to the DI out of my SYN1 box into the aux stomp, the IR20 has more life to the sound. Now, I asked Dave if there was any sort of power amp involvement or power amp simulation going on with the IR loader, kind of similar to what his IR X, J, and D pedals do. And he did confirm that the IR loader, whether you have an impulse response enabled or bypassed, it's always doing some power amp simulation. So, like I said, there is just a little bit more life and dynamics to the sound. Later on, we're going to take a listen to some of the really great sounding factory impulse responses, as well as some of those Reflex IRs from the guys at ML Soundlabs. Okay, let's talk about switching and MIDI really quick. So the amp comes with this 3-button foot switch here, and because it's essentially just a MIDI controller that uses just any 7-pin MIDI cable, you can use any MIDI controller you want with this amp. With the included controller though, you can select between the 3 channels, which is kind of how it's set by default, but you can also program the amp to toggle just different IRs and structure settings and kind of stay on the same channel if you want. So you can have 3 different settings of one channel all using 3 different switches if you really want to. If you use the software to set them differently than their default settings, you can toggle between the different high and low pass filters also. One neat feature that the MIDI programming facilitates is that you can assign any of the 3 structure modes to any channel of the amp and module by sort of holding down this little store button right here. What that's going to do is, based on whatever channel of the amp or the module you're on, it will store the structure mode and the impulse response that you've got selected, so that when you hit that the switch that's associated with that, it'll recall those 3 settings. Those 3 settings being the channel, the structure mode, and the impulse response. So for example, with my Bogner Ecstasy module, I really like the 3rd structure voicing and feel for the blue channel. It's a bit smoother and fatter in the low end, but on the higher gain red channel, I really like the extra cut that the structure mode B provides, and setting that up was really easy. Because the different modules all have their own unique designs and voices, each module is going to sound and behave and react differently to these different structure modes. So don't think of them as sort of a one-size-fits-all across the whole module lineup. Lastly, over here we have the Reactance Control. This one is pretty interesting. It's sort of a combination between depth, presence, and sag all in one control, but the amount that those 3 values are manipulated very much depends on which structure mode you're on. Worth noting is that the position of this knob is not an assignable value, so you can't just sort of set it to one position and save that value for example, channel 2, and then turn the knob the other way and then save that value for channel 3. It's a global setting kind of across all 3 channels. One other quick note is that you cannot run the amp without a module. So if you were hoping to use this as a small 20-watt pedal platform amp with a built-in IR loader, as of now, you will need to grab a module to do that. Okay, let's shift gears here, and we're gonna talk about this absolutely killer BE Dlx module. So just like I believe every other module in Synergy's lineup, this is a 2-channel unit, and each channel is identical and neither channel will change how the other one sounds. Now, if you watch this video and you think to yourself that you'd rather have one channel with a bit more of a clean sound, but still have that second channel for like the really high gain rock sounds, I would recommend checking out Dave's BE module. Now, each channel has its own gain, bass, mids, and trebles, as well as a switch to toggle between the lower gain BE mode or the higher gain HBE mode. Each channel also has a switch to add more saturation and more gain and compression to the sound. Okay, for this next section, I'll put a high resolution screenshot so that you can see exactly what's on the front of this board while I talk about it here. Now, on the physical board itself, there's a three-way cathode switch letting you select from 3 different resistor values and capacitor values. There's a two-way fat switch that you can use to change from the default mode to a fatter and beefier sound. This is the same fat control found on Dave's full-size BE amps. There's also a gain structure switch that you can change from the default position to a lower gain setting if you want more classic rock vibes. This correlates to the structure switch found on his full-size amps. So what having all these switches on the inside of the module means is that you can make some adjustments to those switches to alter the sound of the module in some unique ways, whether it's more low end and less gain for a kind of a fatter classic rock sound, or maybe you want the tighter low end but less gain, or you want that extra beefy low end but the default higher gain structure. On top of the ability with this amp to set each channel's structure and reactance sound. So there's a lot here, but one thing I want to point out is that these modules are all very different from one another. The Ecstasy module doesn't have the same internal switches that this unit has, and not all of them have these small little switches inside. That decision is completely left up to the module designers. Okay, so hopefully I've laid out all of the information for you guys for both the amp itself and for this module. I know it was kind of a lot, but the amp has a lot of stuff to talk about because this video is for 2 separate products, and I really want to give each one its fair amount of time in front of the camera. All right, let's hear some more clean sounds. Now, Dave said that this clean channel was based on a Fender type sound, and I think this thing is very, very good in terms of just the headroom that I was getting on stage and just like the beefiness to the clean sound with a really good amount of chime. For the mic'd up speaker cabinet, I don't have any effects in the loop here, so a little bit of reverb will be added in post, but that's it. What we will hear though is the DI signal out into the quad cortex, which has a stereo left and right, reverb, delay, and chorus that's also going into the interface. We're going to hear how the clean channel sounds coming out of the speaker cabinet going into the microphones, and then we will also hear what the DI signal sounds like with the quad cortex and its stereo effects. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm also going to be using the Charvel today with the Sir Aldrich pickup and the Duncan Saturday Night Special here in the neck. right, let's take a listen to the DI sounds. Yep, that's a clean channel, and I really like that it's built in and that you're not forced to try and dial in one channel of your module with a lower gain setting than what you'd otherwise want to use. Now, speaking of the module, let's head over to channel 2 and hear some more sounds from this BE Dlx module. Now, I've got a nice classic rock type crunch sound dialed in that easily transitions to higher gain 70s and 80s rock and not too aggressive 90s grunge rock sounds, but it still allows me to clean up nicely with the volume knob or the volume pedal without forcing me to go to the clean sound or the clean channel if I don't want to, if I do still want a little extra bite on the sound. You know, it's kind of that perfect edge of breakup if I clean up just a little bit, but it still has tons of headroom available to hit it with a boost if you really do want to have more of a high gain, one channel kind of does everything type sound for your classic rock and some of your modern rock, your grunge music, kind of stuff like that. Golden Boy boost. Now, like I said before, these two channels are 100% identical, so you can dial these in exactly how you want, whether it's two crunch sounds or two high gain sounds, maybe having one having just a different structure mode than the other one, or set up so that you can have a different IR on one versus a different IR on the other channel. Or you can have both of them set exactly the same, but just have one with a higher volume setting so that you can just quickly jump from one to the other if you want to have that louder solo boost sound for lead work. So for this video and for our show this weekend though, I had channel 3 set up with more gain and a different structure for a different overall vibe than just the crunch sound with a drive boost in front. Let's kick over to channel 3. Also worth noting during the show is that I really liked the way the module sounded having both channels in BE mode. I just had the red channel, channel 3, dialed up with a lot more gain, and also it sounded really good with the boost as well. So it was sort of just a little bit more aggressively voiced in terms of the EQing and with just a lot more gain on the gain control. Golden Boy. Okay, so now we've heard all three channels, I'm going to sweep through the EQ and the switches to let you guys hear how that affects the sound. There's still a lot of good definition in the low end. It didn't get woofy and muddy and gross. It got much louder with more mids in there. Just watching the levels over there, and it just like progressively got louder. All right, let's switch over to HBE mode. Okay, let's hear what that saturation switch does. The gain control really doesn't do a whole lot past 10 o'clock, but maybe that's just because it's throwing all of the gain that the knob would include typically. Maybe it's just putting that in as the default gain. So, but I did hear a little volume drop. That's okay. Plenty of headroom left on the unit to compensate for that volume drop. But overall, for me personally, in the style of music that we play, BE mode with a little bit of gain up here. Let me see how this sounds. Like, that's a very, very good hard rock sound. And again, it's got the headroom remaining for either of my boosts on either the clean boost or the drive boost on the Golden Boy. So for example, the clean boost here, it's off. Or the drive boost. So yeah, lots of flexibility just with that channel, but when you throw in the clean channel and the crunch channel that you can also take down to a clean channel, I mean, there's so much flexibility with just this unit and this amplifier. Okay, real quick, let's jump through the 3 different structure sounds, and I'll just kind of keep it on this channel so you can hear how it affects each one. Okay, last but not least, let's check out that reactance control. Alright, so lots and lots of sounds and flexibility, and it's in no small part, a lot of that is attributed to the amp and these extra controls over here that you just unfortunately don't get in the SYN1 or the SYN2 or the SYN50. Okay, let's check out a couple more of the factory impulse responses as well as some of the ones from ML Soundlabs. And I will put on the screen what you're hearing based on what the Synergy manual says. I mean, yes, I actually did read the manual. And the ML Soundlab hours that I've grabbed today are the Damon 60 based on, I think, the Hisu 60 speaker, Demon 60 watt speaker, as well as the Greenback. Okay, so hopefully that gives you just a quick idea of some of the many different sounds that you can get, not only with the dozen or so IRs that come loaded in the amp from the factory, but how it can sound with some third-party impulse responses as well. All right, gigging musicians, this is going to be a good one. You've waited patiently, or maybe you just clicked straight to this part on the timeline. Either way, let's go. It's time for the post-gig report. Now, for the show, I used this amp and module paired with my Mako 112 cabinet, and it's loaded with an early 2000s Celestion Vintage 30 for the stage sound, along with my ZLX monitor. I ran direct out from the amp the first two sets using the Damon IR from the ML Soundlabs guys, and the third set I used the factory 412 V30B cabinet and went DI out. It went into the quad cortex for my effects, and then stereo left and right out to the FR behind me and the other side to the house. The sound was huge, but was it loud enough? I know that's what everyone wants to know. Yes, the answer is yes. Unlike some other 20 to 25 watt amps that I've taken on stage, this one is plenty loud to deliver a very good stage volume while not getting in the way of the PA doing its job of reinforcing the sound with the DI signal. Now, Dave said that they don't drive the power section of this amp into clipping nearly as early as some of those other amps that I've used that they would. So the result with this amp is a much clearer and cleaner sound when you've pushed it up pretty loud. Best of all is that you don't need an expensive effects processor to pull off this type of sound. Because the SYN20 has that impulse response loader built in, you can just send that direct out signal into any stereo effects pedal or multi-effects unit, whether it's as simple as just a Boss chorus or a delay pedal or a Stomp HX or something like that. As long as you have a stereo output, you can put together a relatively budget-friendly wet dry wet setup with this amp without really too much trouble at all. Okay, time for a conclusion, and who do I think that this amp is for? Now, at the very beginning of the video, I said that my thoughts on this amp took a pretty dramatic turn. This is now maybe the 6th or so low wattage amp that I've had both in the studio and on stage, and these little EL84 based amps, they either have a distinct loss of definition and clarity when you really push them hard like a gig volume, stage volumes, and some just kind of get really mushy sounding when pushed hard, which I sort of alluded to with the power section clipping a second ago. And for that reason, I've just really kind of never gotten along too well with those little lunchbox EL84 style amps. Now, even though I love the 35 watt Mark V to death, the reason that I didn't buy one and I went with the Big Brother Mark VII instead was because I wanted the extra punch and heft to the sound on stage. And it's not really just a difference on the stage either. In my video comparing the 100 watt version 5153 to the 50 watt version, you could feel a difference even when running them DI. The SYN20, it really doesn't suffer from the mushy structure problem when you really push it on stage, but at the end of the day, you really can't break physics. The sound and the feel of this amp running into my 412 cabinet compared to the sound of this amp running DI into the 50 watt Fryette power station, then to the cabinet, it's noticeably different. The bigger, beefier power section and the bigger tubes and all that and the transformers, it translates into a louder and more powerful overall sound than what you get from this amp. But again, that's just physics doing physicsy things. Where this amp punches well above its weight class compared to a lot of those other lunchbox amps is just the sheer volume output that it has. For a 20 watt amp, it's very loud, and I had zero issues with this on stage and the Mako cabinet. What this amp lacks in output wattage, I think it makes up for in features that honestly, I feel like those are more valuable to most players than simply just being louder. And the more that I dug into these features and really started to use them, my overall opinion on the amp took a much more positive turn, which culminated to sort of where my opinion is now. And when I heard how well it worked on stage, man, it was just sort of like, that was it. That got my seal of approval. At this point, I am fully on board with giving this unit a big ol' thumbs up, and not just for stage use, but also very much here in the studio. It can really thrive in both environments. I think that the gigging musician, the bedroom rocker, and the guys in the studio, they can all find a lot to like in this small and pretty affordable package. And if you're one of those guys who does all three, it makes it even that much more attractive of a product. Now, it's not for everyone though, and if you want a more powerful amp to use with these Synergy modules, they do make that dual module 50 watt head, which unfortunately doesn't have the cool impulse response features and the internal load box, but who knows? I mean, those guys are always innovating, and maybe if they see this one take off and sell really well, they'll be more inclined to cram some bigger transformers and maybe a set of 6L6s or EL34s in there, and we'll have SYN20 IR or something like that in kind of this cool lunchbox aesthetic. Now your other option is to use either the SYN1 or the SYN2 unit and then pair it with a more powerful amp like Synergy's rack mount power amp, or like Steve Fryatt's LX2 power amp, or any guitar amp with an effects loop, which I've done quite a bit with my own SYN1, including how I tested both the 2CP and the Deliverance modules for their review. But as for the SYN20, it gets so much right and brings so many practical features to the table that benefits both players playing out on stage as well as here at home. I think that all of that outweighs the drawbacks of a 20-watt power section. All right, that is going to wrap up this review of both the Synergy SYN20 IR amplifier and the Friedman BE Dlx module. Another big thanks to the guys at Zzounds for sending me these units out for review to spend some time with and then take on stage to really get to know how this thing works and what all it can do. I know it was kind of a lot to unpack for this video, but if you stuck with me for the whole thing, A, thank you, and B, I think you will probably agree that a longer than normal video for something like this is justified in my opinion. Now, like always, I will have affiliate links to all of this stuff, both of these devices right here, and the other things to make this video happen down there in the video description. And you guys might get tired of hearing me say this, but nobody pays me for these videos, so those affiliate purchases that don't really cost you guys anything extra, they really do help support the channel and what I do, like creating neural captures of this amp and module. So stay tuned for more information on that in an upcoming video, because I may have some love to share with you ToneX guys as well. Next, a big thanks to the guys at ML Soundlabs for sending me those new Reflex IRs to check out. Lots of killer sounds with those, and I think it's really cool what they're doing with the Reflex stuff. So definitely, if you haven't yet, go and check out their website in the video description down below to learn more about those Reflex IRs and how they can help get you a better sound either on stage and in the studio. It's like, they're seriously really cool what they're doing. And last but certainly not least, a big thanks to Dave Friedman for taking the time out of his busy schedule to answer some questions that I had about this stuff. He's just a super nice and knowledgeable guy, and if you don't know, they've got a very cool YouTube channel called Tone Talk, where they bring in musicians and other amp builders and other just sort of figures in the industry to talk about tone, and sometimes whiskey also. Okay guys, thanks for hanging out with me. I will catch you guys in the next video. Take care, bye.